Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today, I just got back from the gem show, and so I have a bunch of new purchases. And one of the things I got was some really pretty lapis. It's got a lot of white, and it's got just this intense, rich blue color. So it's a very pretty stuff. It's got a lot of different shaped cuts. And I picked one out that's a teardrop, and I'm going to make a ring out of it today. I'm going to kind of do a streamlined, modern sort of thing, and hopefully it comes out looking cool. We'll give it a try and find out. Before we start, though, I want to thank my supporters. First off, my patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters, and they are a marvelous group, and I do so appreciate their support. Not only the financial part, that's important, but also the fact that they've created a really nice environment over there, and it's nice to get to know them and share ideas and stuff like that. So, thank you for making it that way, you guys. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 23,300, which is amazing. Thank you for that. I love the comments I get from you guys. Sometimes they're very moving, and I do appreciate those ones. It's nice to know I'm helping some people. So thank you also for the financial contributions, the Buy Me a Coffees, the Super Thanks, people who buy my merch from my merch store, and people who buy my ebooks. Those all really help to keep my channel going, and I couldn't do it without your help. So thanks for that. All right, well, let's get started on this project. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks that are available on my merch store. I have a number of different versions of them. This particular one has gauge to inches to millimeter conversion sheet on the back, which I find pretty useful. The big feature I like with these, though, mostly is the dot matrix in the background, because it helps me to draw better pictures. And so it gives me a nice place to keep a record of my projects as I do them. So here's the last video I did. Okay, so this is what I had kind of in mind. Oh, and these are available on the merch store, so get yourself 5 or 6 of them. I've actually filled up about 5 of them now since I started doing the channel, I think. So here's this pretty lapis that I got. See, it looks like the Earth from outer space to me, kind of. So I actually got a big card of them. So I have a bunch of this, and you'll be seeing it again in future videos, I'm sure. But I thought I'd do something kind of simple tonight. It's kind of late start since we were at the show all day. And I'm also a little tired, so forgive me if I don't do a magnificent job on this one. We'll see. So here's my thought. I like streamlined modern, which kind of arose from Art Deco, and you see it a lot in like auto bodies from the 30s, 40s, 50s. They had kind of features that made it look like it had a sense of movement to it, and so things tapered back into kind of torpedo shapes, stuff like that. So I thought I'd do kind of a ring like that to accent this really beautiful stone. So we'll start by making a bezel. I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel, which is 4.76 millimeters. It's going to be 26 gauge, which is 0.41 millimeters thick. For the bottom, I'll use 22 gauge sheet, which is 0.66 millimeters. And for the band, I'm going to use 14 gauge square, which is 1.6 millimeters, and some 18 gauge as a little bit of a decoration in the middle. 18 gauge round, and that's going to be 1 millimeter or so. The decoration, the decorative wire I'm going to put around here is 16 gauge round, so that'll be 1.3 millimeters. I forgot to write that down on this one, I think. So I'll make a little ball out of scrap. I'm probably going to ball up the ends of these 16 gauge wires that go along the side just to see how that looks. If it doesn't look pretty neat, I'll just do balls and then add the wire next to them. We can kind of play it by ear. Let's see, I think that's about it. So let's make a bezel for this. The big thing about making bezels for stuff like this that have a sharp point on them is you don't want to end the bezel where the solder joint is going to be right there. You want to put it somewhere along one of the sides or something. If you have a bunch of solder right at that tip, it's already going to be hard to bend that over that tip nicely because you're trying to compress too much metal into too small of a space. And if you add that solder in that space, it's not going to want to bend at all, really. So it's much easier to deal with when it's over on the side. So just save you a little trouble. So when I do this, then I'll just kind of hold the bezel up against this, and I'll kind of choose a spot over here, and that's going to make a bend, a sharp bend for the point. Oops. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. I got it a little bit too steep, so I'm going to spread it back open a bit. Alright, and from there I think I can just kind of wrap it around. Make sure it's still pretty snug in there. I'll use a T-pin. I'm going to give myself just a little bit of extra for filing purposes. It never fails when I go to one of those shows that I find far more things that I'd like to buy than I can afford to buy. There's always so many pretty stones. Just kind of file that up a bit. Let's file this other end too. Use your miter vise jig if you have one of those. You like to use those. Those do make nice, neat flat spots. Let's talk about my process a little bit before we get going. I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything. I do use a little bit of paste solder anymore. I've gotten introduced to that late in life. It's kind of handy sometimes. I use a liquid flux that I drip on with a dropper bottle. And my torch is a Silversmith model. It's an air acetylene torch, so it pulls in atmospheric air to mix with the acetylene, produces a hotter flame than just plain gas. It's not as hot as oxyacetylene because it doesn't pump pure oxygen in there. It's just atmospheric oxygen, so it's not in the rich concentration like that. But it produces a nice hot flame that I think is perfect for silversmithing. It's hotter than a propane or a butane torch. So you have that much more control, I think. The tip I use is a number 1 generally. So. And that concludes the most common questions I get. But if you have other questions, absolutely feel free to ask me in the comments. In fact, doing this channel gives you a bit of imposter syndrome because in my mind I'm just a guy who knows how to make jewelry. But some people see my channel and think, oh, this guy is some expert or something, and I am so not an expert. I do like to experiment with this stuff though, so it's a fun learning process that I could share with you guys. I do have quite a few years of doing this, although I didn't really start to innovate much until the past, I don't know, 10 years, maybe. When you're first learning, you kind of do the same thing over and over again for a while before you start branching out. I expect this I suppose we could use to do this rounded part, kind of like there are bail making pliers opposite that point. That'll get us a pretty consistent rounded back like that. One of the things we'll likely do at the end, and if I forget to remind you, I'm going to tell you now. When I go to set the stone, when you have a sharp point like that, like I said, there's too much material there and you need to get it to all compress into that small area. And so I'll actually thin out the top of the bezel that way, so instead of being 0.41 up here, it's going to be like 0.25 or something real thin up there. You got to be careful not to get it too thin, or you'll leave a bare spot there. And I just really want to have less metal there that I have to compress into that area, and that helps if you do that. So I think we did okay on the size on this. Gosh, that's really pretty stone. It's always a little overwhelming to go to those rock and gem shows because of all the pretty stuff. And then you buy a bunch of stuff and you think, oh, did I buy the right stuff? You have a little buyer's remorse over some and think maybe I should have got that or this. I try to get a variety of stuff so I have some options. So since we're going to be adding some decorations around this, when I soldered this down, I think I'm going to solder it down onto a piece of sheet that's a little bit bigger than we need. So we'll just cut a piece that's about like that wide. And then we'll cut kind of a long skinny piece like that. Because we don't need much space on either side for these wires, but so let's do that. That's pretty close, so let's just cut the end off of that. You can saw that out if you want to. Seems silly when you can just use shears, but some people really like to saw. I guess I get that. That could be soothing, I suppose. Not when you first start doing this, probably. Then it's stressful. Personally, I really like filing. I think filing is enjoyable for some reason. I know I'm weird. So I think about right there is a good spot to solder it down. I'm going to run the file over this a few times just to make sure we got a nice flat surface. And then we'll check the shape one more time in case I accidentally pinched it a little bit. I've done that a few times in the past where I just got a little aggressive while I was holding it and filing it or something, and I distorted it just enough to make it really hard to set the stone. That's always fun. Gosh, that's a pretty stone. That should give me enough room on either end. Okay. So there's quite a bit more mass in this base than there is in this bezel. If you're new to this, you want both of these to reach the 1450 degrees or so that hard silver sheet solder takes to flow at about the same time. And so getting this little piece on top up to that temperature, because it's exposed to the flame pretty directly, as well as being quite a bit smaller mass-wise than this piece on the bottom, that is going to be vulnerable to melting. So because you need to get them both up to reach that temperature at about the same time, we're going to actively avoid the bezel a little bit and focus mostly on this sheet. I'm using a little bit thicker sheet than I normally do because I wanted this to be a really stout one. One of the things Something that I always noticed about Streamline Moderne stuff was that they seemed really solid. A lot of times they're, steel. And some of the old like Electrolux vacuums were sort of Streamline Moderne, and my mom had one of those for many years. It was a good vacuum. But it was one of those ones that looks like you're pulling a little barrel around on 4 wheels, and you got a hose coming out of that. I don't know if they make anything like those anymore. Probably not. So I was using the bobbing and weaving method. Another way to get this hot, if you want to get it hot without exposing the bezel to too much flame, is you can tip it up like this and heat from the bottom. Or some people use those screens to elevate it so they can get the torch underneath the piece they're working on. Or some other thing. Flying Chef, who watches my channel a lot, always uses these little crucibles to put something across between those, and those work pretty well too. So I've done that a few times as well. Okay, let's cool this off. Okay, so now we need to make some decorations, I think. So let's start, let's start with a silver ball for the middle part there. So I'm just going to grab a charcoal block and find some silver scrap. We can kind of decide how big we want this ball. There's a little chunk. Let's try that and see how big that comes out. I have plenty of solder here. What I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to pick solder it, which means I'm going to pick up a little bit on the end of this pick here. It's titanium. And then when I get this piece up to the right temperature, I'll be able to just move it in there and touch it at the spot that I want. And if I have the temperature right and I time it right, it should just jump right on there and do what I want it to do. Now whether that happens or not is sometimes a different story. But I think I'm babbly tonight. My eye, right now that looks centered. Now, after I'm almost done, when I look at it, it will no longer look centered. Because, that's how the world works, I guess. Look at it from this. Alright, I got some 16 gauge round here that I was using the other day. Let's see if we ball this up. Let's see how it looks when we lay it down. My concern is that it's not always very consistent when you ball these up. We need at least I'm going to cut them about that long based on, we're going to melt some of the end here, and I want it to stick out past there a little ways. We could probably go a little bit longer, so let's do it about there. Alright, let's see if we can ball this up sort of neatly. I've never been very good at doing this thing, balling stuff up. So if you have any tricks you think work really well to make it consistent and nice, I'd be curious to hear what you do that. So I get kind of bumpy bumpy balls there. Generally, you don't want to have bumpy balls. That one's a little rounded. Let's try that and see how that works. I'd like these to really be tight up against there, so I'm going to really try to get that to match up nice if I can. If you don't have it tight, oftentimes it'll have an inconsistent seam between the bezel and the decoration you're putting around it, and then it looks kind of amateurish. You know, nobody wants their stuff to look amateurish. At least I wouldn't think. Let's see, how did I draw that up? So I had those separating a little bit about right here, so that I could have some other ones kind of coming out. Okay, so we'll bend it outwards a little bit right there. That's pretty good. That looks reasonably similar. So I think what I might do, is I might file the bottom of the round part here flatter so that it solders down really nicely. That looks pretty good. Okay. I'm just going to cut 3 more pieces and put them in there. And we'll see how they fit. If I need to, when I get it hot enough, if the solder's flowing, I should be able to push this together a little bit more if I need to. So let me cut a few more pieces here. Alright, so I'm going to trim off all of this excess sheet, and then I'm going to decide where to cut these various ones off. Okay, so I marked some spots where I think I'm going to cut this off. I did a little cleanup filing and stuff to get that kind of neatened up. I haven't pickled it long enough, obviously, but okay. That was hard enough to cut, and I don't think I'm going to get a very precise cut if I do it this way. And so I'm going to use my saws to get the rest of these. Thankfully you can't see most of my mess here, so I'm just going to follow this. Okay, we'll go from there, I think. So I think I got everything trimmed off kind of how I want it. And it needs to pickle some more probably. So I'm going to let that happen. And in the meantime, we can work on that band. And I cut two pieces, which should yield about an 8.5. So we'll see. But I think in order to get kind of this waviness that I want, I think I need to make them kind of like recurve bow shaped. So I'm going to find the center of each of these, I think, next. Yeah, about there. It's pretty close anyway. Looks pretty good. And then towards the end, I want them to curve back here, so maybe about line up those center pieces. Right there. Sometimes if you want just a nice curve, if you just grab the end of it like this, I kind of hold my fingers here so I can't move beyond that. Something kind of like that. That's pretty darn close. So let's see if we can make this one match that one. Pretty close. So here's where I think I'm going to run some 18 gauge wire from right here down to about right there. So make a mark about the same distance from the center of that. Oops, back here. Alright, so my feeling is I should solder this to that, and this one to that. So in order to do that, I'd like it to have a relatively nice join there, so let's file this along like that. put it up here, it should kind of just merge. I like that. Again, there's a mass disparity here, so you have quite a bit more mass in the square wire than this little 18 gauge wire. So I'm going to spend more time heating the square wire. Okay, I'm going to solder those together. We'll see if this turns out cool or not. I'm not even sure if it will. I've never made a band quite like this, so it'll be a good experiment. Let's see if we can kind of make this into a band or not. To get everything shaped as close as possible, and then I'm going to file this top flat a little bit. Which way does it look better? This way? This way. I'm inclined to say that way. I think you could make an argument for either way. Usually try and kind of eyeball the center point from the top, like this. Might have to use some T-pins to kind of hold it in place. I'm going to use a little easy solder on this one. Let's get this down there. close to this. I was shooting for about an 8. I got it about an 8. So let's let that clean up. I think we got successful solder joints there. And then we go take a little neck break and polish that. So I'm going to go ahead and set this stone. I did file that a little bit thinner. And let's start over there. I'm just going to kind of hold down and push that over the tip a little bit. I use my chain nose pliers, the side of it here, to use as a bezel pusher and this part to use as a burnisher. That is not the only way to do things. Many people have other methods of doing that. That's fine. I find that to be pretty effective for me. Okay, let's do some burnishing. It's where you just rub that top edge. The last thing I'll probably do is use the Dremel to kind of touch up the top of that bezel using a blue fine polishing wheel. Neaten these up a little bit, make sure they're sort of symmetrical. That gives the impression of forward motion, I think. Like a little meteor, kind of. That's pretty cool. I'd give myself a B+ on this one. I didn't get everything as symmetrical as I'd like. Maybe able to do a little bit of, fiddling with the geometry of it a little bit to make it look a little closer. But we'll see. I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Tell me what you think. Okay, well that was the Lapis Teardrop Streamline Ring. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go, and I would love it if you take a moment and visit my main channel page. I have been doing this for about 3.5 years at 3 per week, so there's a big pile of videos over there. I believe there's 530 some videos over there, and so there's quite a bit of content. I'm almost certain that you'll be able to find something else useful and or entertaining. So check out a few videos over on my main channel page, and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Don't forget to visit the video description down below. There's some important links there. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that cool environment over there. You can get the lowest level tier is just to get rid of all the YouTube ads, which is kind of nice. The other tiers have some other different perks like exclusive tutorials just for them and some live streaming and things like that. So check it out, sign up if you'd like, and there's a link to get my ebooks if you want a nice guide to the various videos that I did each of the past 2 years. There will be one at the beginning of 2026 about 2025's videos. Each one is an ebook that has a page for each of the videos that I did in that year. It includes the original sketch that I did prior to doing the project, as well as the final picture, a list of materials that I used, difficulty rating, somewhat arbitrary on my part, and some other notes that I made about the project that I thought about afterwards or during the project that I may not have mentioned in the video. So things that I may, if I learned something from the project and or changed the way I did things because of it, or if I would do something different if I was to do the same project again, all those kind of things. Whether I didn't like the final outcome, sometimes things don't always work out the way you hope. So get one of those. That's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips and a super nice way to support my channel. Finally, there's a link to my general merch store, so get yourself some cool mugs or magnets, or get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks I told you about at the beginning. I find them super handy for keeping track of your projects and how you made them, and and so you can go back and revisit those if you ever want to recreate them. So, all right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.